Okay, I'm back. My dog is safely in the yard and now she's grounded, so she's on the leash and I'm still out here. But I forgot it was trash day for some of the neighborhood, but she did not. It was a disaster. Okay, so let's go back and let's talk about what happened at Daisy's house at lunch. So, this was the opportunity. This was when Daisy was supposed to tell Tom, I never loved you. Did she say it? No, she did not. All she did was start whining about wanting to go to town. But what she did do was mouth the words, I love you, to Gatsby across the table while her husband was watching. That's a good choice. Now, a question that I usually ask in class is, why didn't Tom just smash Gatsby? He could. We knew from chapter one he had a cruel body. We knew from chapter one he had been a powerful end of football. And so he could have just stood up and just slugged Gatsby and knocked him out of the chair. He could have just pounded him. But he didn't, because rich people don't make scenes. Oh, Tom will get him. Don't worry about that. But Tom is not going to use his fists. Tom is too classy for that. So he knows now that his wife is having an affair. His wife is in the car with Gatsby going to New York, while Tom is in the car with Jordan and Nick, because Daisy just was so slick and said, oh, you guys go. I'll ride with Gatsby. She's a genius. And now Tom's driving Gatsby's yellow car. Now, remember, there aren't too many yellow cars on the road at this time. And so that's going to set up what's going to happen later, because somebody's going to get hit by the yellow car. Now, the whole thing about a medium, when Gatsby, or when Tom says, I made an investigation into Gatsby and I know about his past. And Jordan's like, oh, so you've been to a medium. Well, what's a medium do? Like Long Island medium and stuff like that. They talk to ghosts. And the reason why she said that is because she's laughing, because she knows Gatsby's always lied about his past, that he doesn't have a past, that he's not old money. Jordan knows. And so she and Nick both laugh. But Tom's got it. Tom's like, he's no Oxford man. He wears a pink suit. He maybe went to Oxford, New Mexico. Tom laughs. Tom knows. He knows Gatsby's too gaudy to be old money. He doesn't know all these old money unwritten rules. Okay, so then we have Wilson. Wilson said he found something funny the other day, and he's going to take his wife away. We don't know what that was. But Tom is in danger of losing his wife to Gatsby, and now he's in danger of losing his mistress to her husband. So, and then Nick kind of compares Tom and George, and he says George just looks very guilty. Tom doesn't give two craps, but I don't know. I mean, Tom doesn't like to lose either. Okay, so now we're going into town. They stop at Wilson's to get some gas. Wilson's physically ill from what he's found out about his wife, like really sick. And then Nick looks up. He's like, he felt that feeling like somebody was staring at him. And so he looked up and saw Myrtle Wilson looking down at their car. And Myrtle Wilson looked like she was super jealous. And Nick figured out that she must have been staring at Jordan. She has no idea what Daisy looks like. And so she's looking at Jordan thinking that that's Daisy. Wonder why she didn't come down. We'll find that out soon too. There was no confusion like the confusion of a simple mind, and as we drove away, Tom was feeling the hot whips of panic. His wife and his mistress, until an hour ago secure and inviolate, were slipping precipitately from his control. Instinct made him step on the accelerator with the double purpose of overtaking Daisy and leaving Wilson behind. And we sped along toward Astoria at 50 miles an hour, until among the spidery girders of the elevated, we came in sight of the easy-going blue coupe. Those big movies around 50th Street are cool, suggested Jordan. I love New York on summer afternoons when everyone's away. There's something very sensuous about it, overripe, as if all sorts of funny fruits were going to fall into your hands. The word sensuous had the effect of further disquieting Tom, But before he could invent a protest, the coupe came to a stop, and Daisy signaled us to draw up alongside. "Where are we going?" she cried. "How about the movies?" "It's so hot," she complained. "You go. We'll ride around and meet you after." With an effort, her wit rose faintly. "We'll meet you on some corner. I'll be the man smoking 2 cigarettes." "We can't argue about it here," said Tom impatiently as a truck gave out a cursing whistle behind us. "You follow me to the south side of Central Park in front of the plaza." Several times he turned his head and looked back for their car, and if the traffic delayed them, he slowed up until they came into sight. I think he was afraid they would dart down a side street and out of his life forever. But they didn't, and we all took the less explicable step of engaging the parlor of a suite in the Plaza Hotel. The prolonged and tumultuous argument that ended by herding us into the room eludes me, though I have a sharp physical memory that, in the course of it, my underwear kept climbing like a damp snake around my legs, and intermittent beads of sweat raced cool across my back. The notion originated with Daisy's suggestion that we hire 5 bathrooms and take cold baths, and then assumed a more tangible form as a place to have a mint julep. Each of us said over and over that it was a crazy idea. We all talked at once to a baffled clerk and thought, or pretended to think, that we were being very funny. The room was large and stifling, and though it was already 4 o'clock, opening the windows admitted only a gust of hot shrubbery from the park. Daisy went to the mirror and stood with her back to us, fixing her hair. "It's a swell suite," whispered Jordan respectfully, and everyone laughed. "Open another window," commanded Daisy without turning around. "There aren't any more." "Well, we'd better telephone for an axe." "The thing to do is forget about the heat," said Tom impatiently. "You make it 10 times worse by crabbing about it." He unrolled the bottle of whiskey from the towel and put it on the table. "Why not let her alone, old sport?" remarked Gatsby. "You're the one that wanted to come to town." There was a moment of silence. The telephone book slipped from its nail and splashed to the floor, whereupon Jordan whispered, "Excuse me," but this time no one laughed. I'll pick it up," I offered. "I've got it." Gatsby examined the parted string, muttered, in an interested way, and tossed the book on a chair. "That's a great expression of yours, isn't it?" said Tom sharply. "What is? All this old sport business? Where'd you pick that up?" "Now see here, Tom," said Daisy, turning around from the mirror. "If you're going to make personal remarks, I won't stay here a minute. Call up and order some ice for the mint julep." As Tom took up the receiver, the compressed heat exploded into sound, and we were listening to the portentous chords of Mendelssohn's Wedding March from the ballroom below. "Imagine marrying anybody in this heat," cried Jordan dismally. "Still, I was married in the middle of June," Daisy remembered. "Louisville in June. Somebody fainted. Who was it fainted, Tom?" "Biloxi," he answered shortly. "A man named Biloxi. Biloxi. And he made boxes, that's a fact. He was from Biloxi, Tennessee. They carried him into my house," appended Jordan, "because we lived just 2 doors from the church. And he stayed 3 weeks until Daddy told him he had to get out. The day after he left, Daddy died." After a moment, she added as if it might have sounded irreverent, "There wasn't any connection." "I used to know a Bill Biloxi from Memphis," I remarked. "That was his cousin. I knew his whole family history before he left. He gave me an aluminum putter that I use today." The music had died down as the ceremony began, and now a long cheer floated in at the window, followed by intermittent cries of "Yay!" and finally by a burst of jazz as the dancing began. "We're getting old," said Daisy. "If we were young, we'd rise and dance." "Remember Biloxi?" Jordan warned her. "Where'd you know him, Tom?" "Biloxi?" He concentrated with an effort. "I didn't know him. He was a friend of Daisy's." "He was not," she denied. "I'd never seen him before. He came down in the private car." "Well, he said he knew you. He was raised in Louisville. Asa Bird brought him around at the last minute and asked if we had room for him." Jordan smiled. "He was probably bumming his way home. He told me he was president of your class at Yale." Tom and I looked at each other blankly. "Biloxi?" "First place, we didn't have any president." Gatsby's foot beat a short, restless tattoo, and Tom eyed him suddenly. "By the way, Mr. Gatsby, I understand you're an Oxford man." "Not exactly." "Oh, yes. I understand you went to Oxford." "Yes, I went there." A pause. Then Tom's voice incredulous and insulting. "You must have gone there about the time Biloxi went to New Haven." Another pause. The waiter knocked and came in with crushed mint and ice, but the silence was unbroken by his "thank you" and the soft closing of the door. This tremendous detail was to be cleared up at last. "I told you I went there," said Gatsby. "I heard you, but I'd like to know when." "It was in 1919. I only stayed 5 months. That's why I can't really call myself an Oxford man. Tom glanced around to see if we mirrored his unbelief, but we were all looking at Gatsby. It was an opportunity they gave to some of the officers after the armistice, he continued. We could go to any of the universities in England or France. I wanted to get up and slap him on the back. I had one of those renewals of complete faith in him that I'd experienced before. Daisy rose, smiling faintly, and went to the table. Open the whiskey, Tom, she ordered, and I'll make you a mint julep. Then you won't seem so stupid to yourself. Look at the mint. Wait a minute, snapped Tom. I want to ask Gatsby one more question. Go on, said Gatsby politely. What kind of row are you trying to cause in my house anyway? Or anyhow? They were out in the open at last, and Gatsby was content. He isn't causing a row. Daisy looked desperately from one to the other. You're causing a row. Please have a little self-control. Self-control? Repeated Tom incredulously. I suppose the latest thing is to sit back and let Mr. Nobody from nowhere make love to your wife. Well, if that's the idea, you can count me out. Nowadays, people begin by sneering at family life and family institutions, and next they'll throw everything overboard and have intermarriage between black and white. Flushed with his impassioned gibberish, he saw himself standing alone on the last barrier of civilization. We're all white here, murmured Jordan. I know I'm not very popular. I don't give big parties. I suppose you've got to make your house into a pigsty in order to have any friends. In the modern world. Angry as I was, as we all were, I was tempted to laugh whenever he opened his mouth. The transition from libertine to prig was so complete. I've got something to tell you, old sport, began Gatsby. But Daisy guessed at his intention. Please don't, she interrupted helplessly. Please, let's all go home. Why don't we all go home? That's a good idea. I got up. Come on, Tom, nobody wants to drink. I want to know what Mr. Gatsby has to tell me. Your wife doesn't love you, said Gatsby. She's never loved you. She loves me. You must be crazy, exclaimed Tom automatically. Gatsby sprang to his feet, vivid with excitement. She never loved you, do you hear? He cried. She only married you because I was poor and she was tired of waiting for me. It was a terrible mistake, but in her heart she never loved anyone except me. At this point, Jordan and I tried to go, but Tom and Gatsby insisted with competitive firmness that we remain, as though neither of them had anything to conceal, and it would be a privilege to partake vicariously of their emotions. Sit down, Daisy. Tom's voice groped unsuccessfully for the paternal note. What's been going on? I want to hear all about it. I told you what's been going on, said Gatsby. Going on for 5 years, and you didn't know. Tom turned sharply to Daisy sharply. You've been seeing this fellow for 5 years? Not seeing, said Gatsby. No, we couldn't meet. But both of us loved each other all that time, old sport, and you didn't know. I used to laugh sometimes. But there was no laughter in his eyes to think that you didn't know. Oh, that's all. Tom tapped his thick fingers together like a clergyman and leaned back in his chair. You're crazy, he exploded. I can't speak about what happened 5 years ago because I didn't know Daisy then, and I'll be damned if I see how you got within a mile of her unless you brought the groceries to the back door. But all the rest of that's a goddamn lie. Daisy loved me when she married me, and she loves me now. No, said Gatsby, shaking his head. She does, though. The trouble is that sometimes she gets foolish ideas in her head and doesn't know what she's doing. He nodded sagely. And what's more, I love Daisy, too. Once in a while I go off on a spree and make a fool of myself, but I always come back, and in my heart, I love her all the time. You're revolting, said Daisy. She turned to me, and her voice dropping an octave lower filled the room with thrilling scorn. Do you know why we left Chicago? I'm surprised they didn't treat you to the story of that little spree. Gatsby walked over and stood beside her. Daisy, that's all over now, he said earnestly. It doesn't matter anymore. Just tell him the truth, that you never loved him and it's all wiped out forever. She looked at him blindly. Why, how could I love him? Possibly. You never loved him. She hesitated. Her eyes fell on Jordan and me with a sort of appeal, as though she realized at last what she was doing, and as though she had never, all along, intended doing anything at all. But it was done now. It was too late. I never loved him, she said with perceptible reluctance. Not at Kapiolani? Demanded Tom suddenly. No. From the ballroom beneath, muffled, suffocating chords were drifting up on hot waves of air. Not that day I carried you down from the punch bowl to keep your shoes dry? There was a husky tenderness in his tone. Daisy? Please don't. Her voice was cold, but the rancor was gone from it. She looked at Gatsby. There, Jay, she said, but her hand, as she tried to light a cigarette, was trembling. She threw the cigarette and the burning match on the carpet. Oh, you want too much, she cried to Gatsby. I love you now. Isn't that enough? I can't help what's past. She began to sob helplessly. I did love him once, but I loved you too. Gatsby's eyes opened and closed. You loved me too? He repeated. Even that's a lie, said Tom savagely. She didn't know you were alive. Why, there are things between Daisy and me that you'll never know, things that neither of us can ever forget. The words seemed to bite physically into Gatsby. I want to speak to Daisy alone, he insisted. She's all excited now. Even alone, I can't say I never loved Tom, she admitted in a pitiful voice. It wouldn't be true. Of course it wouldn't, agreed Tom. She turned to her husband. As if it mattered to you, she said. Of course it matters. I'm going to take better care of you from now on. You don't understand, said Gatsby with a touch of panic. You're not going to take care of her anymore. I'm not. Tom opened his eyes wide and laughed. He could afford to control himself now. Why's that? Daisy's leaving you. Nonsense. I am, though, she said with a visible effort. She's not leaving me. Tom's words suddenly leaned down over Gatsby. Certainly not for a common swindler who'd have to steal the ring he put on her finger. I won't stand this, cried Daisy. Oh, please, let's get out. Who are you, anyhow? Broke out Tom. You're one of that bunch that hangs around with Meyer Wolfsheim. That much I happen to know. I've made a little investigation into your affairs, and I'll carry it further tomorrow. You can suit yourself about that, old sport, said Gatsby steadily. I found out what your drugstores were. He turned to us and spoke rapidly. He and this Wolfsheim bought up a lot of side street drugstores here and in Chicago and sold grain alcohol over the counter. That's one of his little stunts. I picked him for a bootlegger the first time I saw him, and I wasn't far wrong. What about it? Said Gatsby politely. I guess your friend Walter Chase wasn't too proud to come in on it. And you left him in the lurch, didn't you? You let him go to jail for over a month over in New Jersey. God, you ought to hear Walter on the subject of you. He came to us dead broke. He was very glad to pick up some money, old sport. Don't you call me old sport, cried Tom. Gatsby said nothing. Walter could have you up on the betting laws, too, but Wolfsheim scared him into shutting his mouth. That unfamiliar yet recognizable look was back again in Gatsby's face. That drugstore business was just small change, continued Tom slowly, but you've got something on now that Walter's afraid to tell me about. I glanced at Daisy, who was staring terrified between Gatsby and her husband, and at Jordan, who had begun to balance an invisible but absorbing object on the tip of her chin. Then I turned back to Gatsby and was startled at his expression. He looked, and this is said in all contempt for the babbled slander of his garden, as if he had killed a man. For a moment, the set of his face could be described in just that fantastic way. It passed, and he began to talk excitedly to Daisy, denying everything, defending his name against accusations that had not been made. But with every word, she was drawing further and further into herself, so that he gave up, and only the dead dream fought on as the afternoon slipped away, trying to touch what was no longer tangible, struggling unhappily, undespairingly toward that lost voice across the room. The voice begged again to go. Please, Tom, I can't stand this anymore. Her frightened eyes told that whatever intentions, whatever courage she had, were definitely gone. You two start on home, Daisy, said Tom, in Mr. Gatsby's car. She looked at Tom, alarmed now, but he insisted with magnanimous scorn. Go on. He won't annoy you. I think he realizes his presumption. Little flirtation is over. And they were gone, without a word, snapped out, made accidental, isolated like ghosts, even from our pity. After a moment, Tom got up and began wrapping the unopened bottle of whiskey in the towel. Want any of this stuff? Jordan? Nick? I didn't answer. Nick? He asked again. What? Want any? No. I just remembered that today's my birthday. I was 30. Before me stretched the portentous, menacing road of the new decade. It was 7 o'clock when we got into the coupe with him and started for Long Island. Tom talked incessantly, exulting and laughing, but his voice was as remote from Jordan and me as the foreign clamor on the sidewalk or the tumult of the elevated overhead. Human sympathy has its limits, and we were content to let all their tragic arguments fade with the city lights. 30. The promise of a decade of loneliness, a thinning list of single men to know, a thinning briefcase of enthusiasm, thinning hair. But there was Jordan beside me, who, unlike Daisy, was too wise to ever to carry well-forgotten dreams from age to age. As we passed over the dark bridge, her wan face fell lazily against my coat shoulder, and the formidable stroke of 30 died away with the reassuring pressure of her hand. So we drove on toward death through the cooling twilight. Okay, so just a few things to talk about in here. First of all, Gatsby is out. We know all about his past now, and we know that he wasn't officially an Oxford man. He just went there after the war. We know that Tom found out that he was running a bootlegging operation over the counter at some drugstores, and Daisy's not going to accept that. She's not going to be with somebody who has to make his money illegally. I mean, he might get caught, and then that would look awful for Daisy. So there's no way she would ever go with that. How do you like these people? They are so bored with their life. They leave Tom and Daisy's house, which is on Long Island Sound, right on the water, beautiful place. They drive into New York and get a hotel room so they can drink some stuff. That's it. These people have absolutely nothing to do. So Daisy, she is not going to leave Tom. And as Nick said, she realized at last what it was she was doing, and as though she had never all along intended on doing anything at all. She never intended to leave Tom for Gatsby. He was just some fun. Remember what Jordan said about her? Daisy ought to have something in her life. So Gatsby lost, and Tom is so completely confident that they're not going to end up together that he sends them home in her car so they can talk about it, have a proper breakup. Okay, and then we get to Nick's birthday, a very special day, his 30th birthday. Now, there was a time when 30 was considered over the hill. I mean, life expectancy was low, late 50s, early 60s, I don't know. So 30, which is relatively, I mean, most people, their life really gets going at the age of 30. But back then, if you weren't all settled and set and had your life going, you almost thought that life was over. And Nick thinks about 30, a decade of loneliness, a thinning list of single men to know because they'd all be married by 30, a thinning briefcase of enthusiasm because you're getting older, thinning hair. Well, that's still true. I think people do lose their hair and start looking a little bit older at 30. But he still has Jordan. And now they're going to drive on toward death through the cooling twilight. What can that driving toward death mean